She said. I faked it every time. You should know that. During a fight trying to destroy my confidence, I said, good acting. Then I left. She didn't expect that response, or the silence that followed for 6 months. It wasn't supposed to go this way. I never planned to walk out, but I couldn't just stand there and take it anymore. The words hit me like a freight train. But the worst part wasn't the sting of betrayal, it was the sudden clarity. In that moment, I realized everything she had ever said to me, every complaint, every accusation, was just a performance. She had been playing me for months, maybe longer. And I had been so blind, so caught up in my own guilt and trying to make things work, that I had missed it all. I stood there for a second, frozen in the kitchen, watching her face twist with satisfaction. She had thought she was going to break me. To push me into a corner, where I would beg for forgiveness, where I would grovel for the affection I'd thought we had. Instead, I gave her exactly what she didn't expect: indifference. Good acting. I repeated, the words almost surreal in the quiet of our apartment. I didn't scream, didn't shout, I didn't even argue, I just said it, and I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, and the silence between us stretched so thin that I could almost feel it. She tried calling, texting, sending a barrage of messages. But I never picked up, not once. I wasn't angry anymore, I wasn't sad, I was just done. The first few hours after I left were surreal. I drove aimlessly, letting my mind wander, trying to process what had just happened. I ended up at a diner in Lincoln Park, its neon lights casting a dull glow on the empty streets. The waitress barely looked at me as she refilled my coffee cup, but I could tell she had seen men like me before. Men who were here to nurse a broken heart, or wallow in their own regret. I didn't feel either of those things though. I felt empty. Not sad, not relieved, just numb. I sat there for hours, reading through every single text message she'd sent. At first, they were filled with apologies, with pleas to come back, to fix this. But as the hours passed and I didn't reply, they turned bitter, accusatory. You're really just going to leave over this? They read. Typical. Running away instead of dealing with problems. And then, the desperation crept in. Please, I'm sorry. I love you. I'm scared. Where are you? By the time I finished my coffee and ordered a slice of pie, the texts had stopped. The silence was deafening. I didn't respond to a single one. I wasn't punishing her. I just didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who's just admitted that they've been faking the most intimate part of your relationship for months? How do you respond to that? I couldn't find the words, so I didn't speak at all. As I left the diner, the world felt different, like the air was fresher, the streets clearer. It was a small, insignificant change, but it was mine. It was the first time in a long while I felt like I wasn't walking on eggshells. Like I wasn't living in someone else's version of my life. I drove home. Not in a hurry, but not wanting to sit in the quiet of my car for too long. When I walked into the apartment, I could tell immediately that Jessica was pretending to sleep, her breathing too controlled, too shallow. I could see through it, just like I had seen through her act in the kitchen. She had expected me to stay, to try and fix things, but I couldn't. Not anymore. I grabbed my pillow and went to sleep on the couch. I had no intention of confronting her. The next morning, when I woke up, she was already gone. There was no apology, no explanation, just a note on the kitchen counter. I'm staying at Amanda's for a while. We both need space to think. I love you. The words didn't sting, they didn't make me feel anything. I folded the note and tossed it into the trash. That was the last time I ever saw her. The first few days after I left, everything felt surreal. I was numb, but there was this constant, aching emptiness that followed me wherever I went. I stayed at Marcus Place for a while. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than being alone in the apartment. The apartment that used to be home. The apartment where Jessica had been so sure of herself. So sure that I would always be there to fix things for her. I hadn't even realized how much I had been holding on, how much I had been pretending, until I walked out. It wasn't just the fight. It was everything. All those years of putting her first. Trying to make her happy, trying to be the perfect boyfriend. I'd done all that, and for what? So she could admit, casually, that she had been faking it the whole time. I wasn't angry. At least not in the way I thought I would be. I was disappointed, yes. But mostly, I felt like I had been freed from something I didn't know was weighing me down. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. No more walking on eggshells. No more wondering if today would be the day she'd flip out over something small, making me feel like I was never good enough. But the silence was the hardest part. I had never been good at silence. It used to scare me. The emptiness of it. But now, it felt like a friend. It was my space. It was my time to think, to reflect. The first few days I spent hours lying on Marcus' couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. How did I let it go on so long? How had I convinced myself that I could fix something that was never right to begin with? I had built this whole life around her. Around trying to be what she wanted me to be, trying to meet her expectations, but it wasn't enough. I tried to stay busy. I started going to the gym again, something I had pushed aside for months, because Jessica preferred me to be home with her. I got up early, ran a few miles on the treadmill, and tried to clear my mind. For a few moments it worked. My body felt sore, but it was a good kind of sore. The kind that meant I was still alive. I was still moving forward, even if everything else around me seemed to be crumbling. I didn't respond to Jessica's texts. I didn't want to. Not because I was trying to punish her. I just didn't know what to say. What could I say? I had nothing left to give. She had drained me for so long, and I hadn't even realized it. I had given everything, and it still wasn't enough. Each time my phone buzzed with a new message, I felt the urge to check it, but I didn't. I let the silence stretch between us. It felt like I was finally breathing for the first time in years. There was no more pretending, no more acting like everything was okay, when it wasn't. I had nothing left to prove to her. But as the days passed, I started to feel the weight of it all. Not the anger, not the sadness, but the exhaustion. I was tired. Tired of trying so hard. Tired of being someone I wasn't, just to make her happy. And in the end, it still hadn't been enough. I spent a lot of time thinking about the good moments too. The ones that had made me feel like maybe things would get better. The weekend trips. The nights spent laughing together. The little moments of connection. But now, looking back, I realized those moments were just fleeting. They were just her trying to keep me hooked. Trying to make me think things were okay. It was all a performance. A show she put on so I wouldn't leave. So I wouldn't see the truth. I tried to get out of my head. Tried to focus on something else. I went out with Marcus one night, grabbing drinks at the bar. It was supposed to be a distraction, but every time I picked up my phone to check it, I saw the same texts from Jessica. The first one was apologetic. I didn't mean it, Jay. I was just angry. The next one came an hour later. Please, I'm sorry. I love you. Can we talk? It felt like she was begging, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I wasn't ready to talk. I didn't even know if I ever would be. Marcus saw my hesitation and laughed. You're doing the right thing, man. She's not going to get it until you stop playing along. Don't let her pull you back in. I nodded, but inside, I felt like a part of me was still stuck in that apartment with her. It wasn't just her. It was everything I had invested in that relationship. The life we had built, the plans we had made. But it was all built on a lie. And that lie had finally been exposed. I stayed at Marcus' place for another week, getting lost in my routine. I woke up early, worked out, went to the office. At night, I kept myself busy. I read more, something I hadn't done in months, and watched movies by myself. For the first time in a long time, I was doing things for me. Still, the silence between Jessica and me was deafening. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Not her. But the life we had together. Or what I thought was our life. It wasn't until the weekend came that the weight of it all really hit me. I was sitting in Marcus' living room, watching some random game on TV when my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Jessica. You don't have to ignore me. I'm sorry for what I said. I never meant to hurt you. I looked at the message for a while, my thumb hovering over the screen. But instead of responding, I locked my phone and threw it on the table. I didn't need to explain myself to her, not anymore. I had nothing left to give. It had been a few weeks since I left the apartment. The silence stretched on, and while at first it felt like a relief, I couldn't shake the sense that something was still missing. My days were starting to blur together. I had fallen into a routine, wake up early, work out, go to the office, come home, and eat something. In between, I tried to fill the hours with distractions, reading, catching up on shows, meeting Marcus for drinks. But at night, when everything quieted down, the emptiness crept back in. I thought I was doing fine. But then, one day she called. It was an unexpected moment, really. I was at the gym, listening to music, just trying to get through another set of deadlifts when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw her name. I almost didn't answer. I had promised myself I wouldn't let her back in. But my thumb moved on its own, pressing the screen to pick up. Jay. Her voice was soft, hesitant. I didn't expect you to pick up. But I wanted to talk. I stayed silent for a long moment. Part of me wanted to hang up, just end it right there. But something kept me rooted to the moment. I'm listening, I said. It felt weird to even say those words. As if I was still part of the equation, still giving her a chance. But maybe I wasn't ready to walk away completely. She exhaled, like she was gathering herself. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what I said about us. I shouldn't have said that. I couldn't help the bitterness that rose in me. No. You shouldn't have. I was angry, and I didn't know how to deal with it. She sounded almost broken. It was hard to tell if it was genuine, or if she was just playing the part she always played. I didn't mean to hurt you, Jay. I swear. I've been thinking about how I could fix this. I know it's too late, but I want to try, please. I leaned against the wall of the gym, suddenly feeling exhausted. You've had your chance. You've had plenty of chances. This isn't about me forgiving you, Jessica. It's about the fact that you don't even know what you want. I do know what I want. She said quickly. I want you back. We can figure it out. Please, Jay. I felt something snap inside me, a clarity I hadn't had before. You don't get it. You never got it. All those little moments, the things I did for you, the times I dropped everything for you. They were never enough. Because none of it mattered to you unless it fit into your world, but now I see it. I see it all. She was quiet for a long time, the silence between us heavy. I could almost hear her thinking, could hear the weight of the words she wasn't saying. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer now, almost pleading. I'm sorry, Jay. I really am. I wasn't thinking straight. Can't we just, no. I cut her off. I can't go back to that. You can't just say, I'm sorry, and expect me to forget how everything felt. How I felt. She was quiet again, and this time, I knew. She wasn't gonna fight for me anymore. She was trying to get me to fight for her. But I wasn't going to. I couldn't. I think we're done here. I said, the words steady but final. There was no response. The line went dead, and I was left with nothing but the sound of my own breath. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. Then I hung up. Later that day when I got home, I thought about what happened next. Jessica had always been the one to keep me on edge. Always the one pulling me in and pushing me away. But now, I felt different. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt tired of it all. Tired of pretending that I could fix something that wasn't broken from my side. Tired of chasing someone who never saw me for who I was. The days went by, and I kept moving forward. I didn't let myself look back. I couldn't, but still, the quiet hung in the air. The quiet was the hardest part of it all. It was the space between the phone call and the texts, the time between her apology and my decision. It was the sound of my own thoughts, the ones I had pushed aside for so long, finally rising to the surface. I was getting closer to something. Maybe it was peace. Maybe it was the end. But I couldn't deny it anymore. I was done with her. I was done with the past. And I was finally, for the first time in years, starting to take care of myself. No more games. No more pretending. It was time to live for me. It had been weeks since I'd walked away, and yet it still felt like I was living in two worlds. On the outside, everything was starting to feel normal. I was going to work. Spending time with Marcus, going to the gym, and even meeting some of the people from the old jazz club I used to visit alone. I was re-establishing the things I'd given up when Jessica and I were together. But inside, there was still that space I didn't know how to fill. The silence that hung between me and the life I thought I was supposed to have. I had spent so much time trying to convince myself that I could make her happy, that I had ignored everything else. I'd ignored myself. And now, I was left with the wreckage of what was supposed to be a happy relationship, but was really just a performance from both of us. Then, one evening, I got a message from Jessica. It wasn't the usual barrage of desperate texts. No, this time, it was a single sentence. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the words sink in. I had promised myself that I wouldn't get pulled back into this. I had done the hard work of walking away, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming. Still, I found myself typing a response. We're. She told me to meet her at the same cafe we'd gone to for our first date. That place we used to love when everything seemed possible. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. When I got there, she was already sitting at a table by the window, her back to the street. I took a deep breath before I sat down across from her. She didn't look much different. Her hair was styled the same way, and she wore that same look of forced confidence that she always did when things weren't going her way. Hey, she said, her voice low, almost hesitant. I'm sorry for what happened. I've had time to think about everything. I didn't say anything at first. I just nodded. What else was there to say? She had said it all. Or, at least she had said enough to destroy any trust I had left. I've been Awful to you, she continued, her eyes searching mine for some sign of understanding. I know that. And I've realized that I've been playing games, trying to control everything around me. I thought I could fix it all by pretending. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring it up. Instead, I kept my voice steady. You don't get to fix this. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. She looked down at her coffee, avoiding my gaze. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to understand that I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt a flicker of something inside me, but I didn't let it show. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to go back to the way things were, to let her words ease the hurt that had been festering for so long. But I couldn't, not anymore. You don't get it, I said, my voice firm. You've been playing me this whole time. You've been pretending, and I've been the fool for thinking it was real. She flinched at the words, and for a second, I almost regretted saying it, but no, I couldn't take it back. She needed to hear it. We both did. I know you think you can change, I added, leaning forward slightly. But you can't. Not for me. And not for yourself if you're just going to keep running in circles, trying to fix something that's already broken. The silence that followed was heavy. She didn't respond. She just sat there, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup, looking lost. I wasn't sure if she understood what I was trying to say, or if she even cared anymore. For a moment, I felt like I was back at the beginning, lost in a relationship that had never really been mine to begin with. But then, I really looked at her and saw the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was done. Listen, Jessica, I said softly. I think you need to figure out who you really are, outside of all this. You can't keep using other people to fill the gaps in your life. She nodded slowly, but I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. She wasn't angry either. She was hurt, and for some reason that made it worse. I think I've already figured that out, she whispered. And I think you have too. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the cafe. I left behind everything I had once believed in, everything I had tried to fix, and I walked away. For the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. The air outside felt cold against my skin, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was clear. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going back. The weeks that followed the cafe encounter felt like an unraveling thread. I had made my decision to walk away from Jessica, and I thought that would be the hardest part. But what followed was something else. The silence between us grew heavier. I had closed the door on that chapter of my life, but the echoes of it still lingered, vibrating in the spaces I hadn't yet filled. I spent most of my days in a kind of daze, getting used to the rhythm of a life I hadn't known in so long. I kept up with work, and I started going to the gym more regularly. But something had changed in me. I wasn't doing these things to fill time or keep my mind busy, I was doing them because they were mine. The routine, the effort, it was for me now. Not for anyone else. Not for Jessica. One night, Marcus invited me out for drinks. He had been pushing me to get back to normal, to socialize, to let go of the past. And even though I wasn't sure I was ready, I agreed. We met at the usual bar, the one that had seen too many of our long, drunken conversations. The neon lights flickered above, and the sound of laughter filled the air as soon as I stepped inside. I could already feel the weight lifting. The noise, the warmth of the room, the low hum of people talking, these were the things I had been missing. It wasn't much, but it was something. Marcus was sitting at the bar, nursing a beer when I walked up. "Hey man," he greeted me, a slight smile on his face. "Glad you finally decided to join the living." "Yeah, well, it's about time, right?" I said, sitting down beside him. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. He asked how things were going, and I told him I was managing, trying to move forward. But it was clear to me now that he could tell the difference. There was something new about me, something that wasn't there before. "You've been quiet about Jessica," he said, leaning in slightly, his voice lower now. "How are you really doing with it?" I took a deep breath. I hadn't really let myself think about it too much, not in the way Marcus was asking. It's strange," I said slowly. "I thought I'd be more upset. I thought I'd regret walking away. But I don't, it's just quiet now, and I guess that's what I needed." Marcus nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "That's good, man. Really good." But even as I said those words, I knew it wasn't all peace. The quiet, as much as I had longed for it, wasn't always as comforting as it seemed. There were moments, especially at night when the world was still, when the reality of everything hit me like a brick wall. I had built a life with Jessica, and now, even though I was free of the toxicity, there was an emptiness in the space she left behind. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything. The fights, the resentment, the times I had tried so hard to make her happy. But even more, I thought about how much I had sacrificed of myself in the process. The hobbies I'd abandoned, the plans I'd put on hold, all for the illusion of a happy relationship, but it was never real. And that was the hardest part, to face the realization that I had spent so much of my energy pretending to. I had convinced myself that if I just kept trying, if I just kept being the perfect partner, everything would work out. But that wasn't how it worked. And now I could see that. The days drifted on, and I started feeling more at ease. I wasn't constantly on edge, waiting for the next explosion or silent treatment. I started waking up earlier, going for runs, getting back into the rhythm of my own life. It wasn't perfect, and there were days when the loneliness would creep back in. But it was better than the constant anxiety I had felt for so long. One evening, after work, I went to a local jazz club I used to frequent. It had been years since I'd been there, but something about the quiet, low hum of the music called me back. The familiar scent of aged wood and whiskey filled the air as I sat at a small table in the corner, listening to the band play. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over me. It felt good, grounding in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. I realized, right then, that this was something I had almost forgotten. This was my space, my joy. This wasn't about making someone else happy. It was about rediscovering what made me feel alive. As the night wore on, I sat there, letting the music pull me deeper into myself. I wasn't worried about anything anymore. The past was the past, and I had the power to move forward. I wasn't running from anything. I was learning to live with what had happened, to let it go. By the time I left the club, the cool air felt refreshing against my skin. I walked through the streets, not rushing, just taking in the night. The weight that had been on my chest for so long had finally lifted. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was truly free. I still didn't have all the answers. I still didn't know where life would take me. But I knew one thing: I was starting to find my way again. And that was enough for now. The days had passed, and while I was settling into this new, quieter life, there was always the lingering question: would I ever fully move on? Sure, I had my routine, work, gym, solo dinners, the occasional drink with Marcus. But something was still missing. I kept telling myself I was fine, that I was doing okay, but deep down, there were still moments when the weight of what I had lost hit me harder than I expected. Then, one night, as I was sipping a beer with Marcus at his apartment, he dropped something unexpected. "You know, I ran into Jessica," he said casually, like it was nothing, as if it wasn't a conversation-shifting bombshell. I froze for a second, the beer bottle halfway to my lips. "What? When?" "At the wedding last weekend. She was there with someone, Brian's roommate, I think." The words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, not even a text, not even an apology beyond that one conversation at the cafe. I tried not to let it bother me, but I couldn't help it. I had been moving on, taking steps toward letting go, and hearing that she was with someone else felt like a gut punch I wasn't prepared for. I set the bottle down on the table, leaning forward slightly. "Did she say anything about me?" Marcus looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "She did ask. She wanted to know how you were doing. Did you tell her I was fine?" "I told her you were doing good. That you were happy." It wasn't a lie. I was happy. Or at least I was getting there. But hearing her ask, hearing that she still cared enough to wonder what was going on in my life, made something twist in my chest. "She said she was glad," Marcus continued, not really reading the look on my face. "But she asked if you ever talk about her." "I don't know. She seemed, I don't know, kind of off." I felt a flicker of something, a curiosity maybe. Part of me wanted to know more. Part of me wanted to hear that she was struggling. That she regretted everything. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to know if she was hurting too. That version of me had died the night I walked away from her. "Yeah, I don't talk about her," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Not anymore." There was a pause between us. I didn't know if Marcus was going to say anything else. But I could feel the weight of the silence growing. I had spent so long looking for closure from Jessica, thinking that if I could just talk to her one more time, if I could just get some final piece of the puzzle, it would make everything make sense. But sitting here, hearing about her in passing, I realized something important: I didn't need closure from her. I had it all along. I didn't have to keep looking for answers in someone who would never give them to me. Later that night, I went for a walk, just to clear my head. The cold air stung my face, but it was refreshing, like it was washing away the last remnants of doubt. I had spent so long trying to fix something that wasn't broken from my side. Jessica had made her choices, and I had made mine. I couldn't change that. I walked for a while, through the empty streets, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. I thought about what Marcus had said about Jessica. I thought about how I had been for so long, holding on to something that wasn't real. I had let myself be pulled into her games, her insecurities, and now, I was finally free of it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter, I was just free. I walked past a jazz bar I used to visit and felt a pull toward it. But this time, I didn't go in. I had other things to do, other parts of myself to reclaim. Instead, I kept walking. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't escaping anything. I was just moving forward. As I headed home, I thought about Rachel. I hadn't seen her in a few days, but I had this quiet certainty that I wasn't rushing into anything. There was something different about her. Something real. It wasn't perfect. But it didn't have to be. I wasn't looking for perfection anymore. I was just looking for something honest. Something that didn't require me to change who I was just to fit into someone else's mold. That night, I stayed up a little later than usual. I wasn't thinking about Jessica, or about the life I used to have. I was thinking about what came next. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I woke up early the next morning, my thoughts still tangled from the conversation with Marcus the night before. It was strange, knowing Jessica had asked about me, but I didn't feel anything. There was no desire to reach out, no temptation to revisit the past. I had made it clear to myself that I was done. And now, the silence between us felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I spent the day focused, working without the constant hum of doubt in the back of my mind. Every time I thought about Jessica, it was like I could feel the distance between us growing, widening. It didn't hurt. It didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like progress. Later that evening, I met Rachel for dinner at a small restaurant I had been wanting to try. It was different, but in a good way. She was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived, her back to the room as she scrolled through her phone. I watched her for a moment, taking in the way she didn't seem to be trying too hard to impress anyone, the way she was just there. It was refreshing, comforting even. "Hey," I greeted, sliding into the seat across from her. She looked up, her eyes lighting up with a warm smile. "Hi," she said, setting her phone down. "How was your day?" I shrugged, trying not to make it sound too cliché. "Good, boozy. But it's all starting to feel normal again." Rachel nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I get that. It's funny how you don't realize how much you're holding onto until you let go of it." Her words struck me harder than I expected. For a moment, I just stared at her, realizing how much she had unknowingly echoed the things I had been thinking for weeks. "I've been feeling that way too," I said, finding the words easier than I thought. "I think I'm finally starting to move on from everything. From the past. From her." I paused, feeling the weight of the admission but also a sense of relief that I didn't expect. "It's strange. You think you're done, but you don't realize how much it's been affecting you until it's just gone." Rachel reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, her touch warm and genuine. "It takes time," she said softly. "But you're doing it. You're moving forward, and that's what matters." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude toward her. It was so easy with Rachel. There was no pressure, no games. Just a simple connection that felt real. As we talked more over dinner, I realized how much I had been missing, how much I had been holding myself back in the past. It wasn't just the relationship with Jessica. It was my entire life. I had spent so long trying to make others happy, trying to be what they wanted me to be, that I had forgotten who I was. And now with Rachel, it was different. I could just be me. And that felt like freedom. After dinner, we walked back to her apartment, the air crisp and cool against my skin. I didn't feel any urgency, no rush to figure out where things were going between us. I didn't need to. With Rachel, it felt easy. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about the future. I was living in the present, in the moment. When we got to her building, she turned to me before she opened the door. "I'm really glad we met," she said quietly, her expression sincere. "I am too," I replied, feeling the weight of her words sink in. It wasn't just about the physical attraction, or the comfort of being with someone. It was about something deeper, something real. We said goodnight, and as I walked back to my apartment, I couldn't help but smile. There was a quiet certainty in me now. A sense that I was on the right path. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be bumps along the way. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. The next few days passed in a blur of work and simple pleasures. I spent more time with Rachel, talking, laughing, enjoying each other's company. I felt myself growing more comfortable in this new version of myself. The one who wasn't holding on to the past. The one who wasn't afraid to be real. But even as things with Rachel started to feel more serious, I knew there was still work to be done. I wasn't fully healed yet, not completely. The scars from my time with Jessica were still there, lingering in the background. But they weren't as sharp anymore. They weren't as painful. And that, I realized, was the first step toward truly moving forward. And then, one afternoon as I was getting ready to leave work, I got a message from Marcus. It was short, almost casual. Jessica's at Jake's birthday party. She's asking about you again. I froze for a moment, my heart skipping a beat. I hadn't thought about Jessica in weeks. But hearing that she was asking about me again, it brought up all sorts of memories. And for a split second, I found myself wondering if I should go. If I should see her. Just to see where she was now. But then I remembered what I had already figured out. I didn't need to see her. I didn't need closure. I had moved on. Tell her I'm good. I typed back, then pressed send. It felt like a small victory. And with that, I turned off my phone, slipped on my jacket, and walked out of the office. I wasn't looking back. I was moving forward, and that was enough for me. I woke up early, as usual, but this time, there was a different kind of energy in the air. It wasn't the familiar weight of anxiety or uncertainty that had followed me around for months. It was something else. Something lighter, clearer. It felt like I was waking up to a new version of myself. The version that had been buried for so long. The version that was finally free. The previous months had been a blur of self-discovery. Every day had been a step forward, even if it didn't always feel that way. It wasn't just about moving on from Jessica. It was about rediscovering who I was, what I wanted, and what I was willing to settle for in my life. I had spent so long making her happy. Trying to mold myself into someone she could love, that I had lost touch with what I really wanted. But now, it was all starting to click. I spent the day going through the motions, work, calls, emails, but it was different. There was a sense of peace that wasn't there before. When I got home that evening, I found myself thinking about the future in a way I hadn't in a long time. Not just the future with Rachel, though she was certainly part of it, but the future I was building for myself. I was creating a life that was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living it for me, not for anyone else. The phone buzzed, and I saw it was a message from Marcus. He didn't text much, but when he did, it usually meant something worth hearing. Jessica asked about you again today. The message said. She said she was glad you're doing well. She's with Brian's roommate now, by the way. I read the message, but it didn't bother me the way it would have just a few weeks ago. Jessica was part of my past. I didn't need her approval or her questions. I didn't need to revisit that part of my life. I was about to put the phone down when another message came in. This time it was from Rachel. How's your evening going? Wanna meet up later? I smiled as I typed back. It's going great. How about we grab dinner? I've been meaning to try that new Italian place. I didn't need to think twice. The decision was easy. I had found something real in Rachel, something that felt genuine. She wasn't asking me to be someone I wasn't. She liked me for who I was, and I liked her the same way. It felt right. No games, no manipulation, just two people enjoying each other's company. When we met at the restaurant, the warmth of the place wrapped around me like a hug. The soft lighting, the hum of conversation, the clink of silverware against plates. It was a simple evening, but there was a comfort in it that I hadn't known I needed. How was your day? Rachel asked, her voice warm as she sipped her wine. Better than I thought it would be. I replied, my smile genuine. I've been thinking a lot about everything, you know, how much I've changed since we first met. She raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eye. Changed in what way? I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I think I'm starting to really understand who I am. Not in a finding myself kind of way, but more in a accepting myself way. You know. Like, I'm not waiting for someone else to tell me who I should be. I'm finally doing things because I want to, not because I'm trying to fit into someone else's mold. Rachel nodded, her expression softening. I get that. It's refreshing to hear you say it out loud. You've been through a lot, Jay. And you've come out stronger on the other side. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I wasn't second guessing myself, wondering if I was making the right choice. Sitting there with Rachel, talking about our lives, our future, it felt like everything had come together perfectly. I wasn't holding on to the past anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me feel valued. I had already learned how to do that for myself. As we finished dinner, we talked more about where we saw our lives going. There were no heavy commitments, no pressure to define anything. But I knew, deep down, that this felt different. Rachel wasn't Jessica. She wasn't a reflection of what I thought I needed. She was just herself, and that was enough for me. Walking home that night, I couldn't help but smile. The city felt alive around me, the energy of the streets buzzing with life, and for the first time in so long, I wasn't rushing to escape anything. I wasn't running from my past, I was walking forward, embracing the present. When I got back to my apartment, I sat down on the couch, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't known I needed. I was no longer trying to fill the gaps in my life with empty promises or fantasies. I was living for myself, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke up to the soft light streaming through the window, and I felt content. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: I was on the right path. The past was behind me, and the future, well, the future was mine to shape however I wanted. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that.